Imagine you're in the kitchen preparing your favorite meal. You've had a long work week and you've invited a special someone over to spend quality time together. All of a sudden, you realize that something is wrong. You hear a loud crash. Instinctively, you try to pinpoint where the sound originates from as you swivel your head left, right, front, and behind. You know that to address a potentially serious issue, you need to respond quickly and with accuracy. Our brain compares the smallest difference in sound traveling through each ear. Sound waves emanating from the right or left allows our cochlea to process sound signals or vibrations. The same applies to sound originating from in front or from behind us. Our brain meticulously responds to the specific time, speed, and direction of data that is traveled through both ears, which when processed allows us to respond. There are a myriad of reasons why you may not be able to recognize the source of the sound in the kitchen. For me, it's because I'm a unilateral listener. I can only hear through my right ear. I've been hesitant to share this information with others, as there are typically a wide range of responses, many of which seem to involve shock, probably due to the fact that I've not openly revealed this of what society perceives as a hearing impairment. So what better way to acknowledge this secret that I've not revealed for nearly half of my life than right here and right now? By the end of this talk today, I hope to have persuaded you to do the same. First, I want to acknowledge that we need to change our perceptions towards people with deficiencies or disabilities, and that capabilities as well as disabilities in those who are impacted by various physical or mental disorders should be observed. Whether fully functional or not, think of how society would benefit if we all observe our weaknesses and perceive them as strength. There are some traits that we tend to feel as a source of shame, that we conceal within our darkness, when in reality could shine light on some of the most unique and beautiful traits that define us. I have been unilaterally deaf ever since I was in the first grade, when I suffered from pneumonia and the virus spread to both ears. My left ear lost its hearing as a result. Somewhere near 30 to 40% of children with middle ear infection contract harmful viruses from pneumonia, and many recover. In my case, the infection worsened and resulted in a hearing loss. Compensating for deficiencies requires adjustment. Because sound is only registered through my right ear, regardless of where it originates from, stimuli provokes varying degrees of involuntary shifts as I physically rotate towards a sound to better hear and assess situations. There are two ways to look at this, both of which I have experienced. One way is to focus on what I've lost. The other, perhaps a more challenging way, evokes gratitude on what I've gained. Fortunately, my right ear fully recovered as a result of continuous treatment from teams of specialists. Not so fortunately, deafness on my left ear caused varying difficulties in my daily life, which all resulted from learning to depend on only one ear. In loud places where there are various types and volumes of noise, my brain can get confused, not knowing what to filter out or what to focus on. In 2015, following restorative surgeries in both of my ears, nearly everyone at my elementary school knew about my hearing loss. Most of my friends treated me as they did before, but there always seems to be the one who reminds us of how humans could be unkind. I remember it vividly. When a friend didn't respond to his calls, he retorted, "Can't you hear me? Who are you, Benny?" The instant I heard that, I tried my best to not let it affect me. I acted as if I didn't even care about his barbed comments. But the moment I arrived home, I could no longer repress the pain, humiliation, shame, and powerlessness I had to change my circumstances. Before I could even open my mouth to explain to my mom what had happened, I was sobbing. Being teased for not being able to hear well heightened my sensitivity in what I came to perceive as a deficiency. And I've become much more hesitant to share this information with others who I didn't know. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I didn't want to admit that I was different. I felt flawed. And I genuinely wanted to be perceived the same as my friends without any disabilities. Rob Henderson explains that as social animals, humans have the tendency to follow the crowd based on the proofs of social principles or heuristics that determine how we think, act, and talk. It can therefore be reasoned that because of the strong desire humans have to fit into the crowd, we tend to hide our own individual traits that might otherwise differentiate ourselves. I didn't want to be considered weaker than others, and I didn't want to be viewed as someone who needs special attention or treatment just because I was unilaterally deaf. And I didn't want to be judged as if my disability defined me. And I didn't want myself to be defeated for what I came to perceive as a deficiency. It was a time for a shift in perspective. After all, I could still hear well with my right ear, and I didn't encounter any significant difficulties in communicating. I began to question why I was so disturbed that my unilateral hearing might make people judge me or view me differently. I've came to think on whether being the same as everyone else is overrated. Maybe this distinct trait was not a weakness. Maybe it was a source of strength. Don't we all have something that we are ashamed of? Why do we spend time and energy to hide the truth and feel sorry for ourselves when instead we could own our differences and appreciate and feel proud of our individuality? Why don't we choose to focus on the gratitude for our own abilities to adjust and overcome? One answer to these questions lies on the realities of negativity bias, or the tendency of humans to focus and put more significance to the bad news than the good news. I experience this every day as a student living on a beautiful island with amazing natural environment and amazing weather most of the year. I attend a private international school with outstanding facilities and highly trained staff from one of the best educational and professional backgrounds. And yet, negativity bias arises when my peers resent these circumstances and put greater emphasis on the negative aspects of high school life, like the stresses of assignments, or getting unsatisfactory grades, or having too much to do. Ultimately, because these circumstances are resented, my peers disproportionately weigh the negative aspects more significant than the positives. Another answer to these questions could rest in our fear of rejection from groups. According to a study conducted by Eisenberger, Lieberman, and Williams, it was shown that being rejected from social groups activates the same neuromachinery that we experience when we have physical injuries, like a broken arm or leg. And because this pain of being rejected from groups is so acute, people tend to conform to majority and blend into the crowd, rather than showing off their individual traits and admit their weaknesses. These are some of the many reasons accounting for why we are reluctant to reveal our differences. And I felt increasingly dissatisfied by this and started to question what truly defines my life and my experience. In my junior year, I've begun to reframe nearly all my attention into college applications. Suddenly, instead of trying to blend in, I needed to stand out. And whereas perseverance, positivity, and extroversion were some of the traits that I've cultivated and appreciated about myself, these were the traits that my other friends shared as well. This realization has led me to think more deeply into what truly differentiated my life, my experience, and my character. This has led me to realize that my unilateral hearing was something that not everyone shares. This aspect that used to inspire fear and shame now provided me with unique opportunities and a resulting perspective that framed how I interact with the world. I needed to make sure that I was not overly stressed and that I was getting enough rest and sleep to prevent my ears from aching. Because of my unilateral hearing, I needed to compensate for my deficits and work much harder to listen and understand. And I've grown much more attentive and watchful of slight expressions and cues, allowing me to become more understanding of emotions conveyed through nonverbal means. It is commonly understood that when one sense is compromised, the others heighten. For me, my unilateral hearing has empowered me to be an analytical scholar with razor-sharp focus. It has equipped me to be an empathic human who seeks for open communications and connections with others. Circumstances that might have otherwise blocked me from developing my potential has now actually provided me the opportunities to become more present in my life and relationships. Suddenly, these traits that I used to perceive as my weakness provide me the opportunities to change my weakness into strength. The concept of yin and yang originates from the Taoist philosophy of ancient China, and it contends that for everything in existence, there are inseparable, notably contradictory forces present at all times in varying degrees. Such contradictions provide greater meaning and significance to our life, which is made richer through contrast. Dr. Brock Bastian emphasizes that painful experiences help us to more understand deeply about what happiness is, and that if we're happy all the time, we won't be able to recognize it. Like the concept of yin and yang, happiness becomes more full and robust when there are painful experiences and when we acknowledge that these experiences will be in our lives. Without these negative aspects of pain and sorrow, the positive aspects of our lives, the pleasure and joy, wouldn't be discernible as positive. Without contrast, life becomes a series of mundane events lacking any great significance. Then, if contrast is what makes our life more beautiful, interesting, or worth living, doesn't it also make people more beautiful, interesting, and worthy of time and attention? What then would it take for us to become more comfortable with acknowledging our self-perceived deficits? To name them, norm them, and in so doing, shine light on what we used to consider the darkest parts of ourselves. Stanford researchers Sparkman and Walton explains how evolving social norms can inspire changes in social perceptions and behaviors through the comparison of static and dynamic norms. They consider static norms to be the unchanging aspects of social perception and behaviors, while dynamic norms feature the gradual shifts in acceptable interpersonal relations. In their experiment, the researchers studied the American meat consumption as a behavior that would help them differentiate between static and dynamic norms. The static norm statement simply stated that some Americans are trying to eat less meat, while the dynamic norm statement noted that some Americans are changing and now eat less meat. Results show that those who were exposed to the dynamic norm statement showed more interest in conforming to the dynamic norm, with more participants choosing to reduce their meat consumptions than those who were exposed to the static norm. It may seem like semantics, but this experiment shows how simply acknowledging that societal behaviors or perceptions are changing dynamically can inspire our own perceptions and behaviors to change. If this is true, we would be able to change on how we perceive our own weaknesses and strengths. In fact, for the past 4 years, the South Korean government has hosted the Fail Expo for those who have experienced failures in workplaces or startups, opening opportunities for them to learn about their shortcomings and resulting learning. More than 3 million citizens of South Korea has participated in this exposition, and they have cultivated collective actions towards accepting and normalizing their failures, and in doing so, encouraging participants and audiences to not give up when faced with adversity. This seems to contradict the age-old, seemingly stagnant social Korean norm of how we perceive ourselves and how we try to focus on the best of ourselves in order to ensure our good reputation. This societal and nationwide effort is an appeal to the public to become accepting of their own self-perceived deficits. We all know what we consider our own weaknesses to be. Rather than burying them in shame, let's join a movement to reveal our own differences, and by doing so, acknowledge the opportunities that we will get towards an individual path of success. Reframing to redefine these norms shouldn't be a process that should be considered as a process that could be quickly conquered. And at first, admitting our weaknesses and revealing them to others may not be comfortable nor rewarding. But trust me, it can be done, it should be done, and you will be better for it. In fact, we will all be better for it. Thank you.